Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here with us on day 2 of our conference for the Sloan Sports Analytics Competitive Advantage Series presented by Kager, also known as the Craft Analytics Group. I'm so excited to present today's presentation of how to drive audience for women's sports with our speaker, founder of Highlighter, Ariel Chambers.
Hi, everyone. I don't necessarily know if this clicker is going to work for me because technology is, social is my thing, technology not so much, but welcome. Thank you for sharing your energy with me this morning. I'm going to make this as interactive as possible because rigid things make me cringe. So I'm going to go through this and questions will be at the end, but I might go through a little faster so we can get to talking because women's sports is something that I really, really, really love and I can talk about exhaustingly and you'll learn that about me, but I hope y'all can talk about it exhaustingly with me. So, welcome to Highlight Her. If you guys don't know, we're gonna walk through it and we're gonna talk about it. But here we go.
I'm joined by the very lovely Ari Chambers.
What's up, y'all? It's Ari here. Hey. Hey, girl.
First of all, I love your shirt. Why do you play so much? Why do you play so much? Why do you play so much? Why do you play so
much? Art is groundbreaking.
Art is Serena Williams.
Hey, this is A.
Hey, this is B.
And this is Chatter.
I'm beautiful, black, and intelligent. I'm passionate.
I'm black and I'm proud.
The very first woman to win a Rollins Gold Glove.
For little girls, you have something that they can aim for.
It feels like a dream come true. So surreal to be receiving this much praise.
You can't just show up and expect greatness. You have to really put in that work.
I've always been that person that stood up for what is right and stood against what is wrong.
Congrats, rookies, on being drafted to the Wnba.
Just a little advice.
Be confident in yourself because you do belong here.
Girl power.
You know it. We always doing it. We doing it. I hope that ignited y'all as much as it ignited me. But before I sit here and talk to you for 30 minutes, I feel like you guys should get to know me a little bit more. My name is Ariel Chambers. I joined Bleacher Report in 2019 after being a professional cheerleader. I was on the entertainment teams for the Knicks, the Rangers, and the Liberty, and I noticed the discrepancy in women's media coverage. A lot of my friends played in the Wnba, and I could count on one hand how many media members there were, and I thought that was like kind of terrible, right? You're the top 144 athletes going in and out of the world's most famous arena, and nobody's telling your story. So what I did, I put my phone up. It's like all the young ones out there, I'm telling you, all it takes, put your phone up and talk to your friends and post it online. And Bleacher Report found me, and I was able to come on board and start their women's platform. And yeah, I transitioned to covering it, and what's so dope about Highlight Her is it's all sports. And so I was able to extend my love for basketball into soccer, hockey, softball, everything that deals with women's sports and culture. And yeah, that's me, a little bit of my accolades. I'm a black belt, so don't mess with me. But from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm all day, you already know. But I'm an ACC baby, so I grew up with like Kay Yao and Sylvia Fowles and Brenda Freeze back when Maryland was in the ACC. You already know how that goes because the ACC is now like Big East. It's kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, rambling. So, oops, can we go back one? Because I knew this clicker would do this. So, how many in here know what Highlighter is? Oh, thanks. Thank you. So, Highlighter is a bold community that amplifies women's sports and culture and empowers women to step in spaces that we know we belong. We just need to show the world that we belong. But it's not about proving it, it's just displaying it. And so we cover all ages, levels, abilities, and sports. So that means if somebody down the street from you is doing something cool, you can put it online. We'll blast it. We'll make it go viral. Or if you have a player that you've been like, I want to know more about her, we'll tell the story. And so we've amassed over 180,000 followers. And what I'm really most proud of is that it's been through a grassroots level. The first 2.5 years, we weren't on market. we just did it, paying attention to our fans, the fans of the game. And why I'm here is that we're going to debunk the myth that only women can support women's sports. So just really, really paying attention and being engulfed in the women's game, that's something that was really, really special to me. And I hope it's reflected in the passion of the page. And I think that you guys could see that with the electric-ness of the sizzle. And so, 84% of sports fans are interested in women's sports. So that means that a lot of times people are like, we don't know if we want to dabble into the women's sports space, but 84% of sports fans in general want to see that, and 61% of women's sports fans are male. So this is reflected not only in live games, but in the consumption. So whenever you're at a bar or anything, and you know that there's a big game on, just know that we're there. And 64% of our followers are male. And so this gets into interesting investing with companies. Later on, we'll talk about that. But just know that there's a huge audience that goes beyond the gender construct that you would think to support women's sports. The power of her, growing fandom. We've seen this, a spike. This really excites me because in the past 2 years alone, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. I don't know if you guys have been on Twitter, if you guys have been online or seen women's sports be displayed more on your screen, but 493% increase in viewership of the NWSL alone was really, really cool to watch. It's a newer league. We have the Wnba, who's 25 years going into their 26th season, but the NWSL is newer than that. And so you have the Wnba leading the way, but showing that there's sustainability within women's pro sports in the States. You see additive leagues like Athletes Unlimited that's in their inaugural season for basketball. They just completed it. It was a 5-week season. But they have softball, lacrosse, and volleyball as well. And you see that on Fox, you see it on CBS, you see it on Facebook and Twitter, just like you see NBA TV hosting WNBA games and ESPN as well. So all these networks are buying in to showcase, hey, this is a great product, and you see it online with the Twitter broadcast. We're getting in with the Gen Z and, millennial here, but Gen Z being able to consume it on social like they want. And then there's been a 49% increase in viewership of the WNBA regular season, which is really, really special because a lot of times with things that aren't as new, you have to keep finding ways to be inventive. You have to keep finding ways to be innovative. And I think the WNBA's resurgence, the 25th season, it really reignited an excitement around the league. And that was really, really cool to watch. And you see the new wave of players, as I don't know who attended the panels yesterday and saw Sue Bird, and it's her last year, so we're sad about it, but I love that. You better give me feedback. But it's her last year, so we see a new wave of generational players with Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart, and those who are like young and electric off the court like Dee Richards. So it's just a really, really fun moment to be a part of, and hopefully we'll see that continuing to increase. This one. Advertisers are leaning in towards women's sports. Women's sports represents a major opportunity to engage male fans, debunking the perception that only women are interested in women's sports. Thus, it makes it much sense for male-oriented brands to sponsor women's sports as more female-focused brands. So I don't know if y'all heard, the WNBA got a huge investment of $75 million. They can allot to marketing and really shape-shifting the way that they present the league. The league in general, I would say, under the direction of Kathy Engelbert, we've seen huge strides, and we know we have a lot more to go, right? But this $75 million investment is exactly what we need. It's not, do we invest? It's just how much. I think that's how we should reshape it because the cost of inaction is greater than the risk at this point. We know that women's sports are here to stay. We know we occupy these spaces. We see it within international play. It's undeniably a great product with USA basketball and US women's national team with soccer. And so we have these brands or these organizations that are pouring into that. I can speak to the WNBA in particular, but we just see a growing investment in it within organizations and companies. But though men are present and are 61% of the supporters, women's fans, women they're half the population, so we cannot ignore us, right? 57% of all bachelor's degrees are now held by women. 72% of mothers work. 89% of banking decisions are influenced by women, and 85% of household purchases are from women. But what's unique about women is we are led to join or to side with brands that have social impact. So with intention, we look for alignment. And that's reflected in Highlight Her. A few of the partners that we partnered with, because again, we didn't go to market until September 23rd, 2021. We've been around since May 2019. I wanted to look for brands that were aligning with what I believed in would push the women's game forward. Our first partnership was Nike, our Empower panel, The Power of Her. It aired before the 2021 NBA All-Star Game, and we had a collection of Black women giving each other roses, giving each other flowers, and just celebrating what we do in that space. We've partnered with Gatorade, which is our chatter series where I talk to players candidly, pretty much, and celebrating their greatness. So greatness starts with G for Gatorade. And we were just discussing everything on and off the field in the court. I had Sydney McLaughlin, Odyssey Alexander, Elena Deladon, Jiggy, she's 14 years old. So just knowing that excellence has no bounds was really cool to display, and that was through Gatorade. And Zell, her home court, was one of my favorite projects to date. We were able to go out in the community and paint murals of deserving athletes and just giving back to their community. So one of my favorites was Sylvia Fowles. She's a 4-time Olympic gold medalist. She's won the Wnba championship a couple of times, too. And it's her last year. And so just to be able to go down to her hometown of Little Haiti and paint a mural of her in the middle of where she grew up, so those kids can see, hey, I can see her, I can be her. And we had her AAU team, which a lot of players give back to their youth organizations, and it was called Sylvia Suns Basketball. It was Miami Suns Basketball. And it was really, really cool to see them react to her. She was in person, and that was driven through Zell and Highlight Her, and we were able to give them a monetary gift at the end of it to help them travel. And so things like that, things with purpose, things with intention, is where I would encourage brands to go, especially with women's sports, because women have so much intentionality behind who they partner with. But they're 25% more likely than males to want brands to be socially responsible, so go us. And the never-ending fight is putting women's sports online, right? So we have a situation where, historically, in the past, the argument was that the interest wasn't there. The argument was that, hey, we're afraid to do this because the numbers won't match. Well, now we have that 493% increase in viewership. We have the visible, very visible excitement around the game. And so it's kind of pressure if you don't. So Bleacher Report and House of Highlights have had a combined 85 million social, they have a combined 85 million social reach, and the post volume for women's sports has doubled. That's a lot of impact. That's a lot of influence. Between Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, it's putting the pressure on these larger brands to showcase what women can do in sport and culture. And we do a lot in sport and culture. And that doesn't mean you post, a humiliating moment. That's what I would really encourage people to see the excellence in women. I would really encourage people to see that we don't have to be perfect all the time. I would really encourage people to know that we have stories beyond the court. I would really encourage people to know that our experiences aren't monolithic, and that you don't just call on a group that hasn't been represented in times of need. Especially in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement, I know a lot of people were looking to the WNBA because it's a league of 80% Black women. But what about those years when it's not Black Lives Matter? What about those years that, players just have things to say? And so I want Highlighter to have that space for them to open up. And I really, my vision for women's sports coverage in general would be that it wouldn't just be Highlighter doing it. And it's not. So I love that my friends are in this space too, and they have platforms that give women that type of coverage. But we see that the impact that sports brands in general have, and I want equal coverage of that now. Sue Bird told us yesterday that there's minimal coverage for her, and I remember watching her in Team USA even in 2016, and why aren't there more people there? And so if we could just get these brands to buy into this, it's not a begging, I don't like the phrase bet on women, it's invest in women, because the betting alludes to a risk, and I don't think there's a risk anymore. I think the risk lays if you don't invest in women. So we see the numbers here, not a numbers person, conversational person. Sorry, analytics conference, I get it. But, but just letting you know that we're making a conscious effort to put the women's game forward, and that's reflected in the post volume 2 times more than what we did last year. And I have gone through this and breezed through this, but you know what? We have time to talk, and I would love if we have some questions so that we can not end 10 minutes early. Oh, no, thanks. Yes.
Hi, nice to see you again. Steph here, I'm from The Athletic. You posted that data about how you guys outperformed the traditional networks like ESPN, SportsCenter, and stuff during the draft. And I was wondering what you thought was driving that. Was it that you had a better reputation in the space? People didn't trust these networks maybe because they haven't paid attention to women in the past, so there's people moving into that space now who are doing the work, that sort of thing? I was just wondering what you thought was behind that.
I think it's the shift from traditional linear programming to social. I think that's what it boils down to. People like to get online to see things, and because they know that we did the groundwork, right? The first 2 years we were on the ground running, asking fans what they like, literally DMing people, and the players are very familiar with the brand, so it's a trust within that. So yes, to answer your question, the trust is there, but to have something quick to like, hey, I can search this on my phone and see what's going on within the draft. I can see what's going on within everything. I think that was the convenience. It was the dynamic aesthetic of the page, like it drew you in. We had graphics, I don't know if you saw in the sizzle because it went kind of fast, but for the draft class we did kind of like a yearbook vibe, a yearbook graphic that was in alignment with Sweetie's mixtape. And so just being able to tie in culture with it is really compelling to a younger audience in particular. And that's another thing that I didn't mention throughout the whole speech, that Highlighter is really big on sport and culture. I don't think that you can have sport without culture, and why would you want that? And so what we do is we capitalize on the culture as well. So say we have a player who likes music, and like Flage coming up. She's a high school player. She's going really high up, and she was on the Rap Game, Jermaine Dupri's show. And knowing that she has that tie-in with music, why not do content with her and music? It's things like that. So when we had the draft, we were like, what's hot right now? Sweetie's mixtape is hot right now. We'll post it up. It got a lot of engagement, a lot of shares. And so it's from a social standpoint and the convenience and just the trusted knowledge that like, hey, they care. Care goes a long way. Yes, baby.
So my question is, I know like Highlighter and then there's like Just Women's Sports, there are these women-focused media companies that are doing a great job, but how important is it for like the New York Times and the Washington Post and those bigger outlets to catch up? Because I think there's still a pretty big disparity in how they come and cover women's sports. I think we saw with like the Serena Williams story that they're not putting in the effort. And so like it's great that we have things like Highlighter, but I was wondering how do we get the New York Times to pay more attention to women's sports, or the Washington Post, or the LA Tribune, or whatever it is?
I think we challenge the editors. I think that there's such a desire to stay in that misogyny that's existed in the sports space for so long. But now we have numbers to back that, hey, people want to see women's sports. Present them with the numbers. And I also, forget us being media. As consumers, we have to consume this in order to keep the women's sports coverage going, because if we're like, we want this, and then somebody posts a video or an article and we're not reading it or watching it, that's not doing us any service either. If we're not following it, there are no numbers to back it. So I would just say to anybody out there that wants to challenge the mainstream media, challenge them. Share compelling stories. Ask them why not. Why not this? And if not, do it on your own. That's how I got to be at Turner Sports. That's how and pretty much everything on the highlighter got there in the first few years. Do it on your own. Don't wait. Social media allows us the space to come up with something and make it go viral. And I'm not even talking about viral in a trivial sense, to make it go crazy online. And you can have as much depth as you want. You can have as much, you have UGC on the page, as much surface level things as you want. But challenge the editors, show them the numbers, show them platforms like Highlighter and our sisters, and show that their numbers to go along with it. And if they say no, guess what? Unless you're on an exclusive contract, don't want to get you in trouble. But do it on your own. Oh, yay! Yay.
Hi, Ari.
Hi, babe.
My question is, how do we expand the conversation beyond like men versus women to include disparities between the leagues, disparities even within the leagues like John Quell Jones called out last week? How do we add like intersectionality to the conversation?
Well, you know how you just told me what John Quell Jones did online. I think that it's really good to have a conversation and not be afraid of those conversations. I do encourage people not to compare the WNBA with the NBA because it's a completely different business model, though we try to rationalize it by saying, hey, the NBA was here at such and such time. No, it's a completely different business model, and it's not owned by the NBA like people think it is. Talk for a different day, but continue the conversation, inherit the responsibility as a media member to talk about it, talk to these players. Like, instead of us just letting John Quell Jones tweet about it, ask her why. Give her the platform to tell how she sees it. And then I remember I was talking to Jantel Lavender 2 weeks ago, and we did a round all on the table, and it was for Athletes Unlimited. And she was like, nobody's even asked me how I'm doing in the 13 years I've played. She was like, this is the first time that this has ever happened. And what I have noticed is bigger companies are leaning into women's sports, but only on their comfort level, so only the big names. But that means you as a person have to come in with general knowledge of who else. So I'll give you a little insight, which I might get in trouble. My publicist isn't here, though. For the Zell Her Home Court, they were posing a different name to honor, and I was like, why not Sylvia Fowles? Why not this 4-time Olympic gold medalist? Why not this 2-time WNBA champion? Why not this super vet that has given herself to the league for so long? Like, why not? So that comes from me paying attention. So pay attention to the game when you pose something to your companies. Pay attention to the game when you look to cover women's sports, because it doesn't have to be the convenient name. We already have that. We can have more. We love that. If you know me, you know I'll talk about Candace Parker to the ends of the earth. But I also can lean into a Courtney Williams. I also can lean into Amanda Zayabi. I can also lean into the soccer side and cover Gotham. I don't have to be restricted. That's because I truly am invested in seeing all women be pushed forward. And you as a person, if you're going to be pushing for women's sports, challenge these editors. Say, hey, we'll do women's sports, but we're only going to do a Sue Bird. Be like, but what about Jordan Canada, who was being brought up under Sue Bird? Let's just talk about that. Talk about how her journey is not been, just this. It's been this, because she's been learning, but she's a 2-time champion. Like, why not? And so just being cognizant of that as you go in and present yourself with things. And also, don't be afraid if it does fail. You know how many men's sports stories fail? A ton of them. So why are we so rigid when it comes to the women's side of things? So don't be afraid of it to fail. If you believe it in enough, if you put enough power behind it, you'll be fine. It's giving presenter.
So I, first of all, big Highlighter fan, follower for almost a year now. One thing that I'm thinking a lot about is there's the consumption of coverage, but there's also consumption of the sport itself, and how do we help, and as fans, very selfishly, how do we access kind of all of the different places that women's sports are streaming? And it's not singular to women's sports, but the the Women's Sports Trust published a whole study on how much more difficult it is to find women's games and to be an active consumer. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how we can continue to push for kind of a more centralized or at least more accessible streaming vision of the world?
So I don't necessarily know about centralized, but I do know that network deals are going to be more readily available. And the League Pass they've been actively working on in the WNBA in particular, so that should be an improved app experience. But I do know that a big complaint with people, especially with League Pass, I'm WNBA centric, with League Pass is the blackouts. But we can't complain about wanting more network television if we're not willing to have those blackouts. So it's kind of like a catch-22. Again, as technology improves, people are going to be better with it. I love the new, new coming of Twitter broadcasts and Facebook broadcasts. They're just convenient. But just, if you're a social media manager, put out a graphic where you can find everything. And until that happens with everybody, it's, we're doing the best we can, but I foresee that more networks are gonna, or not more, but there's gonna be a better network deal in the future that allows us to have more games that we can view on the TV, and then more games that we can view on Twitter if they're not on TV, and then League Pass is still there.
I think unfortunately, one more, last question, all right.
Trying to kick me off the stage, that's rude.
Thank you. This is a little more focused for the Premier Hockey Federation, or what was formerly the U.S. Women's Hockey League. Yeah. What are your thoughts on them, I don't know if partnering is the right word, but pairing with NHL teams? And obviously they have bigger platforms to spread, but what are your thoughts on the women's teams and the men's teams kind of like hyping each other up, I guess?
I love the brother-sister vibe of it. I don't know how practical that is with the NHL and the PHF because two different entities, and we see the same issue with softball and the MLB, but I love the allyship between it. A lot of times we get in the habit of being so protective over women's sports. We're like, we don't need no men. But I'm like, we need us all to work in tandem because like we said, 61% of women's sports fans are male. And so it's really important to get the men involved too. Why wouldn't we want them to love the product? But as far as the PHF, super new league. And I went to the Riveters game last weekend and see the potential in it. And I hope that they keep pushing for visibility, and I hope that, I inherit the responsibility too of helping the visibility there. And so it's just gonna take time, but I hope that we can relentlessly pursue equality in that too, and not just focus on, like I'm guilty of being very basketball centric and just pushing the boundaries a little bit more. But again, we can attack it from a social landscape too, and really, really get it out there. I think that the whole general theme is social media, even though that makes me cringe because I am very much a journalist who's a millennial, so I'm like, long form all day, linear all day. But social is the accessibility that we need right now, and so if we keep talking about it online and pour into influencers too. I know it's like very cringe and very taboo, but you see that happening with AU, Athletes Unlimited. It's their first year. They brought down 6 influencers and had them do like a media situation and got the conversation going. So the PHF can follow in those footsteps, but also with the NHL, I hope that they really, really get behind it and talk about it kind of how you see us forcefully talking to the NBA players about WNBA. I almost said MNBA and y'all wouldn't understand that, but it's fine. But yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks, guys.